stuff. I just left Instagram. I'm gonna figure out how to combine Instagram and Facebook. There's actually a feature that allows us to do that. So maybe my tech team, because I think I get on their nerves a little bit, can help me do that. But today I did want to have a special conversation, a special healthy and holy conversation around the Healthy and Holy Summit. This year, I've just never seen where we have so much scholarship that wants to be here. And I'm gonna put it out there. The price is low, and our scholars, they're not charging us real prices. Like, and I'm not saying that because to brag. I'm saying it because they really are invested in Black faith community and emotional wellness. They're invested in even pushing their own their own thought into a space of saying, I wonder what that would look like if we had healthy, holy conversations around emotional wellness. And so I'm excited about Dr. Harold Truly and Natasha Robinson, as they talk about legalities, legalese in the Black faith community and its effect on our emotional wellness, talking from mass incarceration on down to your own court case. Like, y'all don't really want to miss that conversation. I'm excited that I actually get to sit with the great Dr. Philip R. Butler, one of my favorite people in the world. But he's talking to us about what does it look like to sit in a space of being human and it being a construct. Let me define construct right there. Somebody defines your humanity. That's the conversation that we're talking about. And what does that look like for our emotional wellness? Super excited about my sister, my friend, my support. This thing has been here. She a ride or die, but she's going to be your keynote speaker this year. Olivia Dorsey Tate from Chicago Theological Seminary. I love CTS. I got a special heart for CTS because some of the most brilliant minds come out of CTS. But she's going to be talking with us at the overarching need for trauma informed care in our Black faith communities. What does it look like for us to be emotionally well? Because, y'all, we got a lot of intergenerational impact that we really have not touched. So, what does that look like? And then on our last day, we're going to be talking about what does it look like to really walk through your Bible? And is it really infallible? Ooh, I know some of y'all are like, ooh, but Dr. Angela Parker, this is her scholarship. And so she's going to be talking to us from her book, If God Still Breathing, Why Can't I? Like, we have something to say. We are living epistles, and I'm excited that the Pastors Aid Committee, y'all know those folks, like they come and they're going to be talking about what does it look like for us to walk in the knowledge of knowing the historical context of the Bible, how it applies to us, and what's the ethic when we apply it to our lives. So really excited about this. Now, why did I pumped up the conference first? Because I need to pump the conference up first. I need y'all to go join the conversation. So go to www.healthyholyconversations.org/summit. I'm going to put that in the chat, and I'm going to let it run through because we'll have a deeper conversation right quick. We're on Facebook. That's what we're doing. So we're on Facebook. This is what this looks like. Make sure that we can get this conversation out because this is a big deal. Uh, and why am I so adamant about what it looks like? Make it public. So, and why I'm so adamant about having healthy and holy conversations around particular topics in Black faith spaces. Well, there's a lot on why that's the case. And I really don't have any shame about it. I grew up in a space where we didn't talk about it. We did not talk about what it looked like to process our trauma experiences. We didn't get to talk about that. We didn't get to talk about what it looks like to process pain. We didn't get to talk about that. We have not had an opportunity, really, without it being something overshadowed, an overlay of how we need to forgive in the middle of our pain or whatnot, to have these type of conversations. Um, and it's really hard when you know that that's the case. Tell y'all about the vision of Healthy and Holy Conversations. This really was a rant that I started probably about 6 years ago, and it was titled as such. And then it went from being a rant to actually being something that people really were interested in. Then it went from being that. Can I be honest? It went and it started even before the rent. The rent, I started ranting about this probably when I was 14 or 15 years old. I would laugh with my friend, her name is Misty, and I would say, if we could just have a healthy and holy conversation about it, we could get over it. I grew up Baptist. Y'all hear me? I grew up Bible believing, Bible teaching Baptist. Like that's what it was. And I couldn't figure out why we could use the Bible to explain everything else, but we didn't want to talk about the Bible verses. And I'm saying Bible because that's what I knew at the time that talked about us being traumatized. I couldn't understand why we did not live in spaces where we could talk about the text of terror and how that's affecting our Black community. And this was in the 90s, this was in a whole another century, right? 1990s. And I couldn't figure out why we couldn't take the text and talk about what it looked like to have impoverished communities that we are unable to help because the church itself has an impoverished state of mind because it's just trying to hold on to land. It's trying to hold on to something. I couldn't really figure out why we couldn't talk about church ethic when I was younger. And so I went to school. I just knew I wanted to be a social worker. I knew I wanted to be a social worker at 17. That's a whole nother healthy, holy conversation because I don't know who really knows that. But I had a love for the people. And I know churchy, you had a love for God's people, but I have a love for people. I have a concern for people. And so, but that does not translate over sometimes to individuals because that some people they think like you're supposed to do everything for people. But again, y'all come to the summit, y'all will hear about this space of care and take care of yourself. Um, but I also wanted to know why in Black faith communities we could not talk about religion that heals and religion that harms. We could not talk about the science behind what this pain and what this trauma do to our minds, our bodies, and our souls. But this is something that we're supposed to, in the scriptures, offer to Christ. So I really couldn't figure out, or Christ told us to offer it to God. So like, I couldn't figure out why would I want to in a space, the first commandment is to love. And then the second one is, love with all my heart, my mind, my body, and my spirit. Because some of that is broken, it's hurt. What does that look like? I didn't know at the time that I created Healthy and Holy Conversations that it would be such a powerful rant. That it would turn into a real conversation to where we have seen hundreds of people talk about from their heart, from their mind, from their soul, and from their spirit, what it looks like to seek healing from that pain and from that trauma. So I really want to invite people to just partake in conversation, even beyond this platform, around what does it look like to be well? What does it look like to seek wellness? And what does it look like to call out your brokenness? And then what does that look like when you can call your brokenness a wellspring of health? Like, what does it look like to move through? Last Sunday, I had the privilege of sitting at my friend's church in Boston and going through the history of what was going on in that area and even gentrification as a trauma-informed care conversation, and how there was a neighborhood of color turned into a white neighborhood that became gentrified. And then you still have this church that sits in the center with this historical space and what that looks like. And this is Old West Church, United Methodist Church, and what that looks like. And then the message I talked about, what was the hurting space for Jacob while he was in the wrestle. We will preach that text and we get excited about he wrestled and he wouldn't stop and the hip socket and how he walked out with a new name. But there's something about going to the historical material or the backstory. And as African Americans, our backstory is hard. Our backstory isn't one that's of ease. Our backstory isn't one that's fun to read. And often, even now, 2023, we're watching where governments want to rewrite our backstory. So here it is around this healthy and holy conversation. What do you know your backstory? If you knew the backstory, if you understood the backstory, then maybe you could see where this pain lies. This is one thing I want to mention. People are now throwing around the word epigenetics. So epigenetics is talking about how your DNA, the makeup of who you are, how that looks, how your DNA, how your cell material reroutes and recodes itself based upon your trauma. So it literally says, hey, we got to hold this in our bodies as a reminder. There are a lot of people walking around with epigenetic material in their DNA, legacy material, whether it's blessings or burdens, walking around with it. So your body even responds. And so, what does that look like? I'll stay in the text because I just moved into it, but I feel like we need to talk about it today. What did it look like for Jacob before he became Israel? What did it look like for him to sit in a panic after he went looking for his brother? Like, y'all go to it. So, text, I'm going to use Genesis. Genesis chapter 28, and then I'm moving to Genesis chapter 32. And so what does this look like when someone can sit in a space, a promise, but you forget the promise when there's so much trauma on top of it? What does that look like? Hey, Aaron, what does that look like? It looks like this. It looks like I really am fighting for my life. It looks like I'm really trying to figure things out. It looks like I'm scurrying. Hey, Dr. Sherry, you know that Dr. Sherry cheer me on. So it looks like I'm doing a lot of things that don't make sense when I'm the one seeking out connection. What happens in Black bodies when we start seeking out connection from a response that's epigenetic or from legacy material? Let's talk about Jacob's legacy material. We're going to go further back, not just even Genesis 28. We're going to go further back. Some of his legacy material comes from both of his parents. I got a parent who was going to be sacrificed by his dad on a mountain, and if it hadn't been for a ram in the bush, he would have went through with that. Abraham would have killed Isaac. Let's be clear that the text says that he would have followed through. And we don't discuss what happened to Isaac's mindset. So here's legacy material. I'm expendable for God. Y'all fight me on that. That's part of Jacob's story. We have his mother, legacy material. This is some blessed material. She was a woman in her own right. She spoke for herself. She did for herself. Even in the text, when she was promised to Isaac, Rebecca, when she was promised to Isaac, her mother and her brother Laban said, hey, can we get about 10 days so we could tell her what we've done? They didn't have 10 days. And so she said, yes, I will. Even in her journey to Isaac, she didn't know who Isaac was, but she was like, who is that brother standing over there? That's how that's Margaret's interpretation. But she still had her own agency. And so her agency, though, again, in trauma, moved to protecting her son. So what happens to Jacob? We're still talking about Jacob, but that's his parents' backstory. We could even go further back to his grandparents. We're going to start at his parents. That legacy carried into their marriage. If you read in the text, it says this was the first couple that we see they were in love with each other. Isaac didn't marry somebody else, and Rebecca didn't marry somebody else. They were in love, but they struggled with womb health. So some of us don't like to talk about that. But again, these are healthy, holy conversations that are in the text. They struggled with womb health. She could not get pregnant. It took them 20 years to have a child. And it says they struggled. They hurt about that. It says that Isaac prayed for his wife's womb. Now, I can't say she didn't pray either, but she was hurting. And when she got pregnant with twins. So some of us say, oh, that's exciting. Yeah, she got 2 kids for one. I mean, we will try to put a spin on it. But read the text. These children were fighting in her womb. Her statement about her womb health was, if I have to be pregnant, does it have to be the fight? It was hurting her. What happens to women who struggle in pregnancy? We're excited about it. We get excited about them being pregnant. They are excited, but we have to care in the church around what does it look like for them to be pregnant and offering spaces of care and what they need. Do we talk about that? Moving through Jacob's story. So Jacob is born. He's holding on to his brother's ankle. Here's the pullout. This is where we start to see some of the trauma that is put onto the children. The first phase of trauma, parents, is that they both picked a child. It interrupted their marriage and it interrupted the care for children from both parents. The father picked Esau. Isaac picked Esau. Isaac's trauma told him that was okay because he witnessed his father pick God. So it's okay to pick a kid. It's okay to pick what you think is best for the survival of your community. And this son is going to be the best because he's taken a liking to what the community needs. The community needs a hunter. The community needs a hunter to make sure we have food, to make sure we have what we need. And the mother picked Jacob. Jacob stayed in the house. Jacob, in my prophetic imagination, was the one that was probably scholarly, the one who took care of things inside of their space. Now, what we teach wrong about this is one was weak and one was strong. Not true. Both of them were strong. If you're reading the text later on with Jacob, he was able to move a stone off of a well by himself, where it took several shepherds to normally do it. Very strong man. We should know that from him holding on to his brother's ankle and then fighting in the womb. But here's the choice. Parents, this moves into material that is put in burden put on our children, because now the brothers are at odds. I don't know if they were at odds at birth. We know that there was an ankle holding. We know they were fighting in the womb. But did they have to continue outside of the womb? Because love was separated. Boom. Jacob is now carrying the weight of this. And then we see where his mother's legacy material that was once healthy and strong, and she's able to speak for herself, turned into a toxic care for the child she loved. She decided that they were going to play a trick on Isaac. We got to see that Isaac thinks Jacob is expendable. It's the son he didn't love. We see that he didn't care about this son, because the son that looked like he was going to be the one to continue on with the blessing, he was the one that was going to get the father's blessing. He was going to take care of everybody. He was going to ensure the continuance of the people. That's the one he cared about. He did not care about Jacob. Jacob wasn't going to continue anything for Isaac. We know that Isaac carries inside of his mind, inside of his DNA, that he is expendable. And so the mother she came up with a plan, because she overheard what was necessary in order to get the blessing. Jacob carries that with him, because Jacob is already labeled in the text that he will be a tricky trickster. He's already labeled as a bad guy in the text. He tricks his brother because his mother asked him to. Hey, do that. Actually, it wasn't even an ask. She commanded him to. This is what we're going to do so that you can receive the blessing instead of your brother. Here is this material that keeps the family separate, but we don't know how that ask really affected Jacob, or can we see it as implied? Here's the implication. Jacob left, and he went, and he carried the weight of hurting his brother, stealing from his brother, being disconnected from his brother, as we find that in chapter 32 of Genesis. And in between that time, he ends up with 4 wives, 2 concubines, 2 wives. He ends up with, at this time, 11 children before he has this fight with God. He also ends up with the trauma of knowing, or the emotional heaviness of knowing he's disconnected from his brother. He's disconnected from his family. He has to leave. He went and started his own family. He's these disconnections. And even inside of his own family, they're favorites. He favored one wife, and he was tricked to marry another. And what does it look like when we get to this fight? Well, here's the blessing in this story. This is a call to find yourself. You make up things when your mind is full of trauma and full of compound issues, because you really want to survive. Jacob did everything to survive. The fight for his life was to survive. And not only for him to survive, but to ensure the continuance of those that came after him. And so, but with that continuance had some trauma on it. Now, y'all go read about his own kids. Y'all can see that later on in the text about what his own children did to their brother. But the objective is we got to survive, and this is it. Now, in the wrestle, this is what I discovered in the text. And I need Dr. Sherry, if she's still listening, to come through. Correct me if I'm wrong. But in the text, we find that he goes to look for his brother. He sends someone to tell his brother, hey, I'm here, because he wants to come home. Some of us, recognizing trauma-informed care model, a lot of people want to go home to their church. You got a lot of people that want to go home because they miss home. But as soon as they pull up, as soon as they make that announcement, trauma floods them. They remember all of the pain. They remember everything that happened. They remember all the stuff. And they get scared because all of that unhealed space now is overwhelming versus the joy of returning home. And so he begins to set up all his possessions. He begins to set up all the things that he had, all the slaves, all the stuff, all the animals. He begins to section it off to ensure survival, just in case he gets killed when his brother comes, because the announcement came back that his brother was coming with 400 men. What happens now? Is he going to kill me because I stole from him? All of the things we've done. This is space in our Black churches to where we might need that space to consider. We're asking people to come home. We're asking people to show up. People actually coming home and showing up. but they're coming home with all the collective weight, including that ancestral material or that epigenetic material or that legacy material that they've just been holding. And it has been the thing that they have been surviving off of. It has given them whatever energy they need to keep fighting. And here they are having to face it. So Jacob's next move after that is he's with his 4 wives, 2 wives, 2 concubines, and his 11 children, as it states in the text. He divides them up, tells them to go on their way so that if somebody's caught, at least the rest of them will survive. Again, ensuring the continuance of community, even if we don't survive. From a trauma informed care space, how many of us ensure the continuance of something, even if we're not taking care of ourselves? We're not taking care of the trauma that has impacted our lives. We're not taking care of the current space that we're sitting in. We're not doing that. We're just trying to ensure that the blessing stays alive. And so he finds himself alone. This is the text. He finds himself alone. And in that aloneness, he begins to wrestle with the person that shows up. He begins to wrestle. The announcement that God's face, that it was God, isn't later on into the text, but he wrestles. There are 2 thoughts about the wrestle. One, Jacob's wrestling himself. You have to wrestle with that legacy material because sometimes we think it's a blessing. We think it's great that our parents asked us to do stuff that's not well. We find it funny. Can I be honest? Sometimes we laugh when we find out that parents have messed up kids' credit because they had to put the cable bill in their child name because they didn't know how to manage their money. Yeah, we find it funny. So guess what? That child's now wrestling with all the stuff that's put on them and whatever else has been put on them from the world, whatever else has been put on them as standards from themselves. There's the wrestle. The second thought about this text is that he's wrestling God. Why? Because the last part of the text that he announces that he names this place after saying, I've seen God's face. This is the connection to Genesis 28. Jacob is sitting in the wilderness. He's there, and here comes this ladder. Jacob's ladder, he climbs, and he's talking with God in this space. And God says, I will not leave you until you receive a blessing. Jacob moves through that. So the thought of this being God is because Jacob would not stop fighting. Who he was fighting said, day is breaking and I'm tired. So can we stop this fight right now? Jacob was wrestling for his life and to obtain his self. I just want to. So the critical question in the text, and something that you may ask pastor, therapist, anybody who works in this helping space that's faith-based. The person who he fought with said, what is your name? Sometimes we have to ask our parishioners. Sometimes we have to ask our clients. Sometimes we have to ask ourselves, what is your name? I don't know if Jacob was ever asked his name. I don't know if Jacob was ever asked who he was, because Jacob's story starts out with him being labeled. It starts out with him being invited to do something foul to his own family. He's being labeled again as someone that he can get played tricks on. Like, I'm just gonna let him marry my daughter I really don't care about. So he gonna have to fight for my other daughter. What does that look like when Jacob has lived in label his whole life? And in this fight, somebody finally said, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. I don't know if that's the first time Jacob had ever heard himself realize, because he was all alone fighting this entity, this deity, this power, that he actually was able to say with emphasis his name, and that he was not leaving until he got what he was fighting for. Now, the other part is the second piece, the question from Jacob. He asked, what is your name? And all of that he was fighting, that being he was fighting said, that's neither here nor there, but it's you receiving who you are now. Here is the blessing. Sometimes when we are able to be in receipt of ourselves, all that has happened, all that we are confronted with, and all that we have fought, the label leaves. The name is not relevant because we now have a new insight on where we are going. When Jacob was able to walk away, he walked into his brother, hugging him, loving him, caring for him, and everything that he had stacked and moved around was still there. He walked into a space of acceptance and being received just for himself. So I wonder what it would look like if our brothers and sisters and our siblings that are wrestling with themselves, that are wrestling with God, that are able to see God's face in this fight, recognizing that this is a mirror to their own divinity, able to say their name, able to call out who they are and receive the blessing of the newness of who they are, walking in their self. So, this is what it looks like to walk through a healthy and holy conversation and invite this space to your faith traditions, invite this to your faith congregations, invite this to spaces to walk through and see how do we move through and actualize ourselves. That's how the conversation just went. Y'all notice what I did. It was an actualization. Base needs, safety, belonging, esteem, actualization into transcendence. Now, how do we move the conversation back into the community? Jacob was able to move back into community with his brother, with his family. He was able to do that in that wrestle. And then what does this look like for maintenance? One, you got to revisit it. Jacob did not revisit, even though he was named Israel. There was a revisit. How was it revisited? Because some of that legacy material passed on to his children and their responses and their behaviors and how they did that. It passed on. It passed on. It passed on. Not to mention what happened before him seeing himself and what happened after. So we have to revisit for maintenance so that we don't lapse back into what used to be, but we can now see where God has us today. So I invite you again, go to the conference. What I just did, y'all gonna it's 3 days of it with different people that are gonna be doing beautiful work, talking about what does it look like for us to have trauma-informed care within the Black faith community, so that we can stop enhancing and inducing trauma on ourselves. And it does take us to look at our story. It does take us to look at the backstory. The backstory. It does take us to remember, you know what, stony the road we tried. It does take us to remember that we were shackled and brought here on boats, Black people. It does take us to remember we like the invite to forget that is something I can't process. Well, let's forget that because we need to walk in forgiveness. I can forgive you and still remember. So, but it takes that backstory for us to see where are we wrestling today and what does that look like for us to take this hierarchy of self, integrate it back into our social spaces, and maintain it for the wealth and health of our communities. So again, I invite you, go to www. I think I said too many W's, and I'm gonna put it inside so that you guys can see it. We go to www.healthyholyconversations.org summit, and I want you to go and register for the summit. Y'all give me about 15 minutes because it's Labor Day weekend. So, you still got to work. We work inside of capitalism. So I'm going to do a sale. Y'all got to Sunday, 11:59 to get it at a discounted price. That came at the suggestion of those that are helping me. Like, it's a holiday weekend, Margaret. Let the people get it. So I'm going to put it out there. But I need you, one, go register. Two, if you go register, share this with someone else. And if you don't register, share it with someone else. I got over 5,000 people that follow me, and I need to see it shared a whole lot because the conversation is necessary and it's needed. And it's something that can start to help heal our Black faith communities and our communities abroad. So I appreciate you all. I wonder if y'all got any questions because I'm here today because I got time. I got a touch of time because I'm working on some assignments. But if there are any questions, y'all can ask them. Normally, I'm on here with somebody else because it normally is a conversation. But this is just me giving you a taste of the work and why the work is important. Just by using the biblical text, because we have other sacred texts in our community. We don't like saying that out loud, but we do. You know what the sacred text is? A tub sit on its own bottom. It's a sacred text. I did not take that away from my Black faith community. We have other sacred texts in community, such as our hymns and our spirituals. We have other sacred texts in our community for those. I'm a millennial. We have Southern rap. We have Outkast. We have Goody Mob. We have all of them who are speaking and spit knowledge about community. That's what we got, right? We have other sacred texts in our community. We have the sacred texts that are very hard to see, like the bodies of those that have been slain currently at gun violence and the mismanagement of Black bodies. These two are sacred texts that we read every time we witness their stories. And just using a piece of the sacred text from that which we deem to be the Holy Bible, we were able to see how that exegetical work can maneuver into questioning how do we maneuver through ourselves to find ourselves in all of the pain that we may carry. And so, again, y'all got some questions while I'm up here putting it up. I'm going to stay on for a few seconds. But if not, though, again, y'all see the link at the bottom. Please support. If you can't attend the 21st through the 23rd, I'm going to ask you to support, sponsor someone that you may know need information around anything that needs to be trauma informed. We will be talking about so much at this conference. Yes. And so thank you for saying that, Aaron. It's so much trauma from ableism. Yes, it is. And so we need to talk about these subjects. Again, topics that will be at this year's conference. We're going to be talking about the legalese in our community and how it has affected us, from talking about mass incarceration to just personal legal matters. We will be talking about what does it really look like to be human, and human as a construct. And it blew me away when the speaker on that told me that. But you know what? He wasn't wrong, because in 1619, they started defining our humanity, Black folks, humanity as a construct. We will be talking about disability and how Black faith communities manage with those in various differently bodied spaces. We will be talking about children and how we work with their emotional wellness, not trying to proselytize children and say, you need Jesus so you can't be gay. We're not talking about that. We are talking about what does it look like to spat around and spoil a child? What's the real definition of that? How do we hold space with that? And how do we help our children in spiritual spaces? That would be the concentration of that. We will be looking at what does it look like in our musical space? Like, what's the sounds that are coming into Black faith community? I'm honored to have that conversation with Ahmad Hall, who's graciously willing to sit with me. That's my little brother. And then there's much, much more. So again, join the summit. Y'all see it, register. Give me like 10 minutes to go over until 11:59 on Sunday. It will be at a discounted rate. Please like it, love it, share it. This conversation. Please see the flyers and share them. And if you have any questions, you can DM me about what I talked about today. If it's something you need to comment on, but you don't want to put it in the chat because you don't want people to see it, let us know. And then I got some of my speakers on here right now. I'm seeing it. So we got Yvonne Johnson, who's coming in to talk about our youth. She's going to be talking about dedicated to youth and disability. We got Dr. Sherry Brown Jackson, who will be joining Garland Thomas, and they will be talking about what does it look like for emotional wellness to use the word in a ethical format and do proper exegesis. And again, just so many conversations that are happening 21st through the 23rd. Thank you all for watching today. Again, like it, love it, share it. Please go support the conference. If you can't come, buy a ticket for somebody else so that they can see that there is trauma-informed care conversation happening for Black faith community around spirituality and emotional wellness. I love you all, and I will see y'all on the mend, in the conversation, and all the spaces where you can follow me.